Greetings, booktubers, and welcome back to Grammaticus Books. Welcome to a video episode here in order to kick off the start of April, kick off the start of this new month here and the beginning of spring here. And what better way to kick off April and spring than by doing a video here on the greatest Conan story ever told. Yes, indeed. Today here on the channel, we are going to elaborate and bring out and elucidate why this story that I'm about to bring to you guys here is in fact the greatest Conan story ever told. Now, when you're talking about the greatest Conan stories that have ever been told, there's definitely a short list that pops immediately into everybody's minds. And that short list being Tower of the Elephant, The Frost Giant's Daughter, Queen of the Black Coast, Red Nails, Beyond the Black River, and what else? I think I got them all there. I think those are the headliners on that list. But I'm here to tell you, I am here to bring to your attention that, in fact, the greatest Conan story ever told is none of those. Not only is it none of those fantastic stories there by Robert E. Howard, the greatest Conan story ever told isn't even a story that was written by Robert E. Howard. No, indeed, it wasn't. So if it's not by Robert E. Howard, I hear you saying it has to be Carl Edward Wagner, that fantastic writer of Sword and Sorcery who came up with the Kane books and wrote The Road of Kings with Robert E. Howard's hero here, Conan, with this great cover. But no, it is not Carl Edward Wagner. Well, then it must be Robert Jordan, who did the Conan Chronicles. Surely that great author wrote the greatest story ever told of Conan the Barbarian. But no, gentle viewers, it is not Robert Jordan or the Conan Chronicles. In fact, it is a different author, an author who has been with the Conan stories ever since their rebirth, since the Conan Renaissance in the 1960s. Not only has he been with the Conan Renaissance since the 1960s, he instigated the Conan Renaissance. He brought back those stories. He brought them to the viewers. And as he was going through those original manuscripts by Robert E. Howard, he went in and he did those very necessary edits to correct all those mistakes that Robert E. Howard had put into those original stories. He identified them, polished them up, and made those stories even better than when Robert E. Howard had wrote them himself. And in addition to that, this author, he inserted his own stories to fill in the gaps that Robert E. Howard so unfortunately left when he was writing his original saga of Conan the Barbarian. And by the time he had done all these edits, by the time he had written all these additional stories in order to fill in those gaps, he had come to have an understanding of Robert E. Howard's Conan that surpassed the originator himself. He had a more thorough and deep understanding of what made Conan tick than Robert E. Howard had himself. And then he wrote his absolute masterpiece to cap off the Acer Lance series, which he brought to us starting back in the 1960s. And of course, I am talking the man, the myth, the legend, L. Sprague de Camp. And that story, the story that was his masterpiece, the crowning gem of all of his pastiche stories, was Conan of the Isles. Conan of the Isles. Conan in his silver years as the king in Aquilonia. This is the greatest story ever written by the master himself, L. Sprague de Camp. How good is this book here? And it is a full-length novel, unlike Robert E. Howard, who only wrote one full-length novel, and that was really just a mashup of a bunch of his short stories put together. This is truly a full-length novel, all on its own, with all different material that L. Sprague de Camp brings us here in Conan of the Isles. And this book is so good. I treasure this book so much that I own not one copy of Conan of the Isles, not two copies of Conan of the Isles, not three copies of Conan of the Isles, but 4 copies of Conan of the Isles. That's how much I love this book. Now, why do I have 4 copies of Conan of the Isles? Well, the answer to that question is because I have all my rooms in my house that I most often frequent, and by having 4 copies of this book here, this magnificent book, Conan of the Isles, I can place one in each of those rooms that I spend most of my time in, meaning that at no time when I am in my home is there a copy of this book that is not within quick hands reach, that I can't pick it up, open it up, and bask in the magnificence of L. Sprague de Camp's writing in here. Now, I hear what you're saying, that Lynn Carter, L. Sprague de Camp and Lynn Carter wrote this story, but we know that's nonsense. It was L. Sprague de Camp. Maybe there's a little bit of Lynn Carter in here, but we're going to give credit where credit is due. And L. Sprague de Camp is the crafter and the forger of this masterpiece here, Conan of the Isles. And speaking of masterpiece, Look at the artwork that is on this. This is the best artwork of any of the Acer Lance novels. A great artwork on it here. Wait a minute. Now that's Trash by Boris. Yeah, here we go. This is the one we want. Here's that artwork. Look at that magnificent artwork. Look at this serpent on there. Have you ever seen a more faithfully rendered serpent? Have you ever seen a serpent that just looked like it was a photograph taken right out of a National Geographic magazine and stuck up here onto the cover of this book? Absolutely spectacular and wonderful. And this cover here, as great as it is, it cannot match, though, the quality of the writing by L. Sprague de Camp inside. So what is it? What is the story of Conan of the Isles? Well, I am here to enlighten you, gentle viewers. I'm here to enlighten you and bring to you the story of the greatest Conan epic saga ever crafted by the greatest writer of Conan, L. Sprague de Camp. And like I said here, with this novel, it starts off with Conan of Smeria when he is the king in Aquilonia, and he is in his silver years, in his silver age, his twilight years, in his 60s, ruling over Aquilonia, which he has brought to peace and prosperity. And the novel starts off with Conan in his court, just minding his own business, running the court of Aquilonia, doing his everyday thing, when an evil red sorcerer invades the hall and steals his main advisor away, spirits him away. And what does Conan do here? What does the aged Conan, the 60-year-old silverback Conan do? Why, he does what any king of a major kingdom in Hyborian would do. He abdicates the throne, abandons his son, abandons the kingdom, and goes off on an adventure in order to try to avert the menace and save his kingdom by leaving everybody behind. And he jumps in a ship, goes over to the Bracken Isles, and he looks up his old drinking buddy Sigurd. He gets his drinking buddy Sigurd on board. They put together a band of cutthroats, and they sail across the seas. And where do they go? They go to Mexico. Yes, they sail across the Atlantic from the Hyborian continent over to Central America. And in Central America, Conan is forced to dive off of the ship in order to save his life. And he goes down with a breathing apparatus and has to walk along the bottom of the ocean, something that never was imagined or written about Robert E. Howard, because Robert E. Howard could never even conceive of such a marvelous adventure, such a fantabulous adventure that was brought to us here by L. Sprague de Camp as Conan the Barbarian walking on the floor of the seabed. And as he's walking along the floor of the seabed, he is attacked by a giant squid and a megalodon. And how does he fight them off? Well, he doesn't. They just wind up fighting each other, allowing Conan to escape and get up onto the shores of ancient Mexico. On the shores of ancient Mexico, he finds an ancient city, and in that ancient city, he decides to shack up with a lady of the night. He takes refuge with a lady of the night in her apartment until he can plot how to rescue his crew, which has been very unjustly and very barbarously taken hostage by the Red Menace, by this red sorceress menace in the palace in the center of this ancient city. So he travels through the tunnels into the dungeons underneath the city during the height of their ceremony to execute his crew, chop off their heads and throw them down the steps of the ziggurat, where he comes across a nest of giant lizards. And being Conan, instead of attacking the menace head on, instead of using his mighty thews and his broadsword, his bright shining sword of justice, he lets the dragons loose on all the evil priests and sorceresses, causing mayhem and confusion and rescuing his crew and his drinking buddy Sigurd, more importantly. And what does the master wordsmith L. Sprague de Camp do at this point? Why, he promotes Conan, of course. He promotes him from mere kingship, from merely being a king ruling the mightiest kingdom of Aquilonia, of Hyboria, which is Aquilonia, and he promotes him to godhood. He has him become the ancient Aztec god Quetzalcoatl. And at this point, he has an entire new continent in order to conquer as Conan, the Quetzalcoatl god of ancient Mexico. And what a great story. Isn't that the most fantabulous story that you've ever heard? It has to be, hands down, the greatest Conan story ever told. And with that, I'm going to wrap this one up, and I'm going to say, take care, be safe, and happy April 1st.